Let's start with a quiz, shall we? Can you name a director who has directed a classic film noir, at least one episode of Gilligan's Island, and was a special guest villain on the Batman TV series? She's also responsible for the film I want to discuss today. This is the Kazdoy Closet. I'm Kazdoy. This is my closet full of all the stuff that I love. And today we're going to look at Ida Lupino's 1950 controversial film, Outrage. Let's check it out. I discussed Ida Lupino in an earlier episode called Focusing on Female Filmmakers. I'll put a link to that episode in the description of this episode. She liked to deal with controversial subjects. One of her films from 1949 was Never Fear. This was about a young woman who's a dancer and she becomes a polio victim. She also made the same year Not Wanted, which is a young woman who is an unwed mother. And then in 1953, she made The Bigamist, which was about a guy who was a bigamist, but it was a very sympathetic portrayal of him. And the classic film noir from the same year that I was referring to is, of course, The Hitchhiker, probably Ida Lupino's best film. But in 1950, she made the film that I want to talk about today, and that is Outrage. So it's from 1950. It's only 75 minutes long. It's in beautiful black and white. And this one tackles another controversial subject, the subject of rape. Now, the problem was you had the production code, and they had to approve all the films that were being made, and they did not want to approve a film that was about rape. So they went through the script, they took out any mention of the word rape and several other words that were mentioned. So in this film, our main character, Anne, is referred to as a victim of criminal assault. So if you have all these limitations the censors are giving you, how, as a director, do you film a rape sequence? Well, she did a really good job with this. It's a sequence that occurs near the beginning of the film, and it's very noirish, actually, where you have deserted city streets. This guy is stalking her, and she's crying out for help, but there's nobody around. We have the very noirish lighting and shadows happening. We have a crane shot looking down at her, giving you the feeling that she's trapped. And then most importantly, there's no music during this sequence. So we don't have the music telegraphing that she's in danger. Oh my gosh, what's going to happen? Because we know she is by her expression and by the way it's filmed. So I really appreciate how they keep it simple like that. The next scene after this incident, we just see her approaching her house. She still lives with her parents, a young girl, and she is disheveled. Her clothes are dirty. Her face is dirty. And she goes into her house and stays in her room, understandably, for several days. Her fiance shows up a few times. She doesn't want to see him, of course. But then after about 3 or 4 days, she finally sees him, and he's just the real jerk. He demands that he wants to get married to her right away, and then he starts grabbing her and shaking her, like shaking some sense into her, and she's still traumatized. So she's not into this, and finally she yells out, "Everything is dirty. Everybody in this world is dirty." She finally returns to work like a couple days later, and as she's walking to the bus stop, people on the street are looking at her, and they're whispering to each other like she's a pariah now. And even when she gets to work, the same thing happens. People are ignoring her. People who were friends in an earlier scene are ignoring her now. People are turning their backs to her. They're still whispering and looking at her. And we get all this internally from her because we can hear the voices inside her head, exaggerated, and the sounds are amplified too. So she's just really having a breakdown until finally she figures out, I got to get out of here. She gets on a bus and just randomly, on a whim, takes a bus to LA. Still, when she's in LA, various men throughout the film are kind of leering at her and touching her and stuff, and it's all very kind of creepy and weird. She does meet this guy who's a reverend, and he helps her try to overcome and try to deal with this trauma that's happened to her. Mala Powers plays Anne, the main character. I never heard of her, but she looks kind of like Ida Lupino as far as the hair and makeup goes and her facial structure. So I had to check a couple times to make sure that Ida Lupino wasn't starring in this, because Ida Lupino, of course, was also an actress. Now, the guy playing this reverend who helps her is named Todd Andrews. And this was really a strange casting, because he's just a very weird-looking guy. The way he has expressions, the way he stands, the way he moves, the way he talks. I thought, oh my gosh, is she going to get assaulted by this guy? Because he seemed just so weird and so creepy. But it turns out that he's the one that really helps her on the way to dealing with this problem she had. He does say at one point in the film that he's a war veteran, and he makes some reference about how there's a lot of people in society that have these terrible neuroses, and yet we are neglecting them and turning our back on them. So it kind of reminded me of a lot of film noirs where you have a war veteran who still has a PTSD from the war and dealing with psychological problems. She seems to really like him after a while. She says, "You're the only one who understands me," but he just kind of pushes her away. So I think that's what's going on with him. He's still dealing with his own problems. I'm going to give this a rating of 3.5 buses, because she takes buses to work and she takes a bus to LA and all that kind of stuff. The second half of the film, not quite as strong as the first half. Still liked it though, still very well done. It's a short film, only 75 minutes long, so I kind of wanted more out of it. Now, this is an imprint disc. It's an Australian label I've become unhealthily obsessed with lately. But the artwork is great on the front. It has the nice semi-rigid slip cover that goes on there. There's a scene on the back. And then the artwork on the disc itself is always different. This is the scene where the rapist is stalking her, and you see all these clowns on this photo, on these posters in the background. I guess it's like advertising a carnival or circus in town, and that was kind of creepy too. There's not much on here. It looks really good. It sounds really good. There's only a commentary extra, so I think I overpaid for this in a moment of weakness, but you know, I think it was they were running out of them or something, so I grabbed it. I was afraid I wouldn't be getting any more, but I still like it. I still like having it in my collection. Now, the discs I showed you earlier were part of this box set of Ida Lupino, and I think this one wasn't that much more than just this single disc, so, you know, kind of rip off. Now, where can you see Outrage? Well, you can try to rent it, maybe your local library. I haven't seen it streaming anywhere, at least not right now. So, you know, maybe keep your eyes out for it. But she's an interesting filmmaker. It's an interesting film, and I like how she deals with controversial topics, which is another reason why I gave the rating that I gave it. Hope you like this one. Feel free to leave a comment or suggestion down here. Leave a thumbs up. Don't leave a thumbs down. Subscribe would be great. Share this with your friends and neighbors. Otherwise, thanks again for watching. See you next time.